everybody that we're gonna be asking, so what is diplomacy for you? What does it mean for you? So we can get started with this absolutely amazing topic that we're gonna be discussing with a really young and brilliant Carlo James Aragón. So please feel free just to type your answers and what do you think diplomacy means, or what does diplomacy means to you? And 305 is when I want to be getting officially started and asking, you know, with our speaker, we have some fun questions. And please feel free just to add in the chat what diplomacy means to you. All right, let's see. Let's see, we'd like to see some people, what they're saying. And trying to figure it out which kind of view I want to have. Well, I want to say really quick, diplomacy for me, what it means is actually being able to live now in the United States, born and raised in Mexico, and one of my dreams actually was to, and it still is, so it will be an honor if when I have the opportunity to apply to become a citizen next year, hopefully that everything goes well, and so I would love to be, why not, representing the United States and, you know, this amazing country overseas, and having the opportunity just to do that. And coming from Mexico, that's amazing. Okay, let's see. So Destiny says, diplomacy is connection and relationship building with people from other communities. That is true, that's correct. All right, and somebody from an iPhone, I don't know who that is exactly, but they answer, recognizing, oh, that is Dr. Deborah, I think. Recognizing and understanding needs of other nations. I love that. Okay, and our Madam President of the Board says, an ability to listen and learn from others about their needs, an opportunity to discuss my needs and interests, which includes respecting the needs and interests of the person I'm talking to. I love that. And that's actually the reason why we exist. That's the reason why Global Ties ABQ has been in existence since 1963. Because, you know, we need those relationships around the world. And it's 304. Anybody else that would like to make a comment? So what diplomacy means for you? Okay. Let's see, somebody else can say. David Sayers, I'm gonna call out on you. What do you think about diplomacy?
Sorry,
I know you can hear me.
Yeah, I'm eating, so can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So that's why my video is off. So diplomacy is it's a really unique way of communicating initiatives and efforts between governments and within governments. So and then also, I think as far as being some kind of diplomat or some kind of representative of a government, you have the opportunity to change things, bring new ideas to the environment and to the government and the country you reside. So.
Yes, that is so true. Thank you so much for that perspective, government perspective. He works at the city of Albuquerque, so thank you for everything you do for Albuquerque, for our community, for everybody here in Albuquerque. Okay, it's officially 3:05, so good afternoon, everybody. It makes me very happy to see your faces, and I was able to see some of you yesterday. We were giving our Global Ties ABQ mask. And for those of you that are members, please feel free to let us know when would you like to come over and social distancing. We will be more than happy to give you your Global Ties ABQ mask. And we have new faces. My name is Yuridia Morales, and I have the honor and pleasure to be the executive director of this amazing organization, Global Ties ABQ. So thank you so much for giving me that opportunity. And you know, the reason why I love, one of the reasons actually why I love my job is that I get to meet amazing and interesting, you know, people like Carlo. So Carlo, really thank you so much for the opportunity you're giving us, the honor. I will definitely say honor because you have a lot to offer with us, and you're very humble and New Mexican. You know that I love it that all the time you are, you know, you say like I'm, you know, from New Mexico. So that's absolutely amazing for us. And so just really quick about how I had the opportunity to meet Carlo, and this is how he is well connected to the community in Albuquerque, and how, you know, the importance for him to have Albuquerque and New Mexico represented internationally. He is the one that reached out to me when I used to work at the Hispano Chamber of Commerce. And then he found out that I moved to Global Ties ABQ. He reached out to us in here. He came to the office and he said, how can I help you? So right away I said, you know what, your life and everything that you do is absolutely fantastic. And you're a role model, Carlo. And you know, I know people they're out there watching you right now. And this is a perfect opportunity for you to talk about, you know, who you are and so New Mexico. So please, you know, thank you once again for Carlo James Aragón. Please welcome and thank you for the opportunity that you're giving us today. And if you can please tell us about you. You know what, you are New Mexican, so how is it to be born and raised in New Mexico? You can tell us a little bit about your background before we get into the topic about diplomacy.
Well, thank you really for inviting me and Destiny and Albuquerque Global Ties in general. It's a very big honor to be with you guys and part of the community. First, I would like to say that what I say here now is my own personal views and does not reflect the views of the Department of State. And so I will not talk about policy about certain things. Thank you. But being from New Mexico is a very, very big thing for me, because all aspects of diplomacy that I have kind of built around in terms of my understanding of diplomacy really comes from New Mexico. So like growing up here is a very unique thing. My mom is from the Philippines and my dad is from New Mexico. But I was raised here in New Mexico. And one of the most important things about this place is that it is a place where it has a very unique history, and it's the history of the state and the cultures of the state come alive in every single day. And so as a little kid, I was really exposed to the concept of diplomacy at a very young age, in terms of the fact that I grew up in a multilingual, multicultural household. And most importantly, when I went to go visit my family in Valencia or Las Lunas area, and that is because as a young kid, I started to learn that diplomacy isn't really just about government to government relations. It's also about people to people relations. And it's about building trust or building a connection. And what I mean by that is, like, I take it from examples from my father, who when we went to Valencia, I didn't really speak Spanish as a kid, as a young kid, but I would watch as we go visit my tias and tios, and then all of a sudden he switched into this language and into this culture, into this otherness that I was so astounded that it was so different, but at the same time so familiar. And so he taught me how to not only like linguistically culturally switch, but also code switch, I should say, but also culturally code switch in a way. And that laid the foundation to approaching how to speak to different people, because it really came from like understanding familia and really the importance of connecting to an individual who grew up in a different world. Because as soon as my father spoke in Spanish to my tias and tios, he was speaking with sort of a gravitas of and cultural relevance of 1950s New Mexico, and a time where New Mexico was deeply influenced, more, I would say, by the indigenous peoples of the state of Mexico and of course Spain, than the United States. And then now into the present, I'm watching this and I'm seeing how he's not only code switching in languages, but also culturally. So that really kind of set the foundation for everything I perceive about diplomacy, is because it comes from a place of familiarity. And then I sort of decided to use that as a jumping board. But so I grew up here in Corrales, in the Rio Grande Valley area. And so I also had a very interesting view about New Mexico because it was from an agricultural point of view. Farming and water and, you know, vegetables and the like cosecha was a part of the thing. And also just the aspects about New Mexico is like an agricultural place. And so that itself influenced my worldview as well. And so when I decided to go, and when I went to high school, I was very fortunate to go to Cibola High School. I got involved in sort of the beginnings of what I would say public service and international affairs, which was like two clubs called Senate, Student Senate, and International Club. And funny story about International Club, the person who actually founded the club is sort of a twin of mine in the Foreign Service, I should say. He is also a Foreign Service officer from New Mexico, graduated from Cibola High School, just a year ahead of me, and we've done everything very similar to each other. And so Salman Haji, he is also a fabulous Foreign Service officer. But because of him, and because of Cibola High School Senate, I got interested into the way that public service goes. So I guess like I went to UNM afterwards, and that's really where I developed into really studying international affairs. But I don't really want to talk about what I did, because that's not really important in the grand scheme, because no one can really copy what someone else did. I want to talk about really what I learned in becoming on this trajectory, and what I call is teachable moments. Yuri, is okay. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to this next portion?
Anybody any questions? And I think we're good. And thank you. And actually, you making the comment, you're a role model. You were talking about teachable moments. We're gonna be teaching about teachable moments. And I guess I do have one question before we can continue with that. I love the fact that you continue saying about the richness about culture and how you grew up, and how family oriented, and you seeing your dad speaking Spanish, and I'm sure like that was one of the moments when you're like, okay, so what is it to be in different cultures, because you were able to experience that. So that's absolutely wonderful. And then you're, of course, studied international politics at UNM. And then, so it is important to know about your career. You know why? Because then, you know, I'm sure like later on, we want to have people reaching out to us, reaching out to you, like, okay, please give me more advice. So we'll look for high school students here in New Mexico that will be reaching out to you, so you can give them some presentations. And that's what it is, you know, because it comes from the passion that you have about yourself, of course, growing up in this amazing family of yours, but also here in New Mexico. So bachelor's degree in New Mexico or UNM, and then master's degree, remind me where, but then, I mean, you're like not even 25, right?
I'm 27, but thank you.
Oh. There you go. So teachable moments. So where specifically you found out, or when was it, who's that person, that role model for you to say, I want to be able to represent being a diplomatic, being in a foreign service, and not just that, but actually live in another country? What was that moment?
Well, let me talk more about how I found out about the Foreign Service, and along the way there are these teachable moments. So I'd like to share with you guys, I'm going to share a few things, and it's going to go in a time sequence so you understand my evolution of thought and experiences to lead me to a moment of where I decided that a career in diplomacy is what I want to do. So I'm going to screen share. So in high school, I had an awesome opportunity to do a scholarship called the National Security Language Initiative for Youth. And on this scholarship, I was studying Arabic in Egypt for 6 weeks and in Cairo. So these is of course me, my very young self, and sort of my host brother and his friends. But so I was in Egypt on a State Department sponsored scholarship that is meant to promote language learning. And so in that process of language learning, I met a lot of people who really deeply influenced me. I had a time where I barely knew any Arabic after 6 weeks, but I continuously tried to speak, because this is how you make connections with people. And so I remember in in my time in Egypt that I had a very amazing conversation with my host mom, which was about tomatoes. And the fact that I could talk about tomatoes and describe them was extraordinary for me at the time. So this is my first understanding of what I would say cultural diplomacy is, or what would become public diplomacy. And so then afterwards in 2011, this was all in high school. After I graduated from Cibola High School, I went to Morocco. And there I went to learn Arabic again. And this time I was in a place where Arabic was a completely different language. It was not the same type of Arabic that I realized was in Egypt, which was fine. And so it exposed me to a very different perspective of the Arab world and of the Middle East. And so this is me and my brother, who is actually working in, I think, astronomy and some sort of science things with NASA as well. So he's really accomplished. And then there's my brother Osama, who Moroccan. We got really along well because we were like both half Asians. But then I went to this place, and this place in the Middle East, does anyone know where this is? Just shout out, please. No clues, no nothing. There's a chat. I don't know, I can't see it right now. But let's see if I can find it. I can't find it. Well, anyways, this place is the Sultanate of Oman in the Arabian Peninsula. If any of you could ever even guess that that place of greenery is the Sultanate of Oman in the Arabian Peninsula, I'm very proud of you. Because when I first heard about Oman, I thought I was going to the middle of the desert, but I was wrong. And so again, this exposed me to a diversity of the Middle East and also the importance of Arabic. I was like on the critical language scholarship studying Arabic here for 2 months. But what was so unique about this time and this moment in Oman is that I no longer was unable to barely converse in Arabic. I was actually conversing and understanding Arabic. This is where I would say that I broke into the language and was unconsciously understanding this language. And so why this is important. So I'm gonna leave this picture here and I'm gonna stop screen sharing. I'm gonna say that this is important. Why this is important is because a language allows you an access to another world, another people, another culture. And so when I was sitting with all those friends of mine, and talking to random people in the streets, I would tell them, "Ana Amriki," they're like, or "I'm American," or they'll ask, "Where are you from?" And I'd be like, "I'm American." And then they would look at me like really puzzled, like, "What? This doesn't make sense. How in the world can this brown kid who speaks Arabic be American? It doesn't look like American. It does not look like Hollywood. It does not look anything like him, like them." So I realized that a language is so powerful, and this fact that I am not the typical quote unquote American was even more powerful, because it told a story, it conveyed a narrative that was different from what they had thought about America, which then made them more sympathetic or more understanding or more relatable. Like I was not some foreign object, but I was actually somebody who they viewed as human. And so Oman was a very extraordinary place to experience this type of thing, because it is one of the most welcoming places on the planet. And I mean welcoming in terms of those people you saw like partying with me on the cliffside. They met me only once and invited me into their friend group and learned a lot about me, and I learned a lot about them. And we exchanged cultures, we exchanged, ideas and things like this. But this was all done through language, and this was all done under the auspices of a program that was sponsored by the US Department of State. a public diplomacy program, and it worked. And so from that moment in Oman, I was committed and I was convinced that this was a career for me, that I could, you know, go to places where nobody has ever gone and like represent a different portion of America, a different story, an untold story, which is what I would often tell my friends in Oman. And so I think one thing that really caught people's attention was the fact is that I was from a place called New Mexico. A place called New Mexico where you not only have the American Anglo presence, you have also indigenous presence. And you have, of course, with the Spanish and the mixing of the two, the Hispano presence. And for them, this was an unconceivable thing. How could America, which was in their minds, a very young country, be a country filled with all these different cultures, languages, and peoples? This was not their idea of America. But then I told them the story of our state, and they became very happy about it. And even more importantly was the fact is that I also, as a student of Arabic, I began to realize that New Mexico itself has a lot of cross roots with the Moorish world. And so like our acequia system is an Arabic word. And that means irrigation. And so I made a presentation about irrigation in Oman and using acequia, and they were just blown away. Also, al-burkerke comes from a word called al-burkuk, which in Arabic means plum. So people were just, you know, really kind of like, what is this place? This is not Chicago. This is not New York. This is not Los Angeles. This is something different, and I like it. So that's really what convinced me. And then so I just started to figure out how to join the Foreign Service. How do I join the Foreign Service? So then I want to share again. And I'm going to show you that I went to US Embassy, Argentina. My first experience with the State Department formally was with the US Embassy in Argentina as a cultural affairs intern. And so this is at the palace, the ambassador's palace there. And so it's quite amazing of a story. But what happened in Argentina also convinced me of this place. It was the fact that I was in a cultural affairs position. Let's see, I was at a cultural affairs position in the embassy. And I had my supervisor who looked at me as a 19-year-old kid, I was 19 at the time, looked at me and said, you know what, I want to ask you, what do you want to learn? What do you want to do? And these are signs of a good leader. And so she said, asked me what I wanted to do. And so I said, I want to, you know, kind of work in cultural affairs and English language. She said, okay. So then I created, when I was there, I had the opportunity to work with these 14 binational centers of Argentina on English language. And they were there to support English language learning within Argentina. And guess what? I decided to include New Mexico into this experience. And I created a 6-month competition for English language students across the country to understand America. And my first collaboration was with the George O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, New Mexico. They virtually collaborated with me on screen to give a virtual tour of the museum and tell why George O'Keeffe is famous and tell the story of why New Mexico in her work is famous. And that was my first experience in like real work of public diplomacy. So I then began to kind of experience and want to understand more about careers in the State Department after that. And I told myself this was something that I wanted to do. And so I guess the last portion of my journey was solidified in Oman when I studied Arabic for a year in college and then worked in Oman afterwards. And I will share with you guys that pick those pictures as well, because I think it's important to see how I saw Oman. Let's do this. So there's me in front of a board that I went literally insane about because I was trying to memorize a certain pattern of Arabic verbs and wrote them all out and out and out and out. So my life is filled with Arabic, and this is sort of an expression of like what I did. Everything I did, I surrounded myself with the language and the people and the culture. So this is my best friend Faham, who was really sort of my interlocutor in the country of like culture, and so took me everywhere and introduced me to places. I also went to places by myself as the only American, and often I would find myself in talking about America and of course New Mexico in really intimate conversations in people's like farms, people's homes, whatever. And so there's just pictures of me like having fun, or like having dinner. But these are important moments of diplomacy, because these are intimate moments where people really understand America. And these are more important, I would say, in terms of like on-camera meetings and things like this in diplomacy. It happens more like this in terms of a dinner outside in the middle of a rainy storm. I ate in the rain for this one. I got invited to go to the Emirates with a friend of mine and got to fly Falcons. I was the sole American at this huge concert filled with, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of people. And I was on stage, and I was directed to kind of be a percussionist on stage. And afterwards, everybody noticed I was the only non-Arab Omani person on stage. And they came up and asked me about the United States, or who I was, really. And then I explained about who I was and talked about the United States. This is one of my proudest moments of my time in Oman. And this is because I was working at an Arabic language institute, and then I co-founded an Arabic language institute called Nur Marjan Arabic Institute in Muscat. We worked together to basically create a space where foreigners could come and study Arabic, you know, from universities to government officials to whatever. But I took students to the southern city of Salalah. And this was extraordinary to me about diplomacy and language learning. Is the fact is that a friend of mine, I guess one of the, if you can see sort of the white and black persons in the crowd, they are the Americans in this whole thing. And they met somebody on the plane from Muscat to Salalah, and they got invited to this wedding. They didn't understand how, like they were invited to a wedding. They didn't understand the invitation, but I told them that they should accept. And so they were integrated into this giant party, and they were treated as a guest, and it was a celebration. And so this is sort of a testimony of diplomacy itself. It's so like language learning and cultural diplomacy again. And then this is them at the Yemeni border. You would never think that this place in Yemen or Oman would be green like this. It's a rainforest, literal rainforest. My friends invited me also to see the bullfighting and things like this in Oman. And then random people would also like come in contact with them, and I would tell them the story of America. These guys, after I took this picture, they invited me to a feast right there where we were sitting. Invited the whole village and basically cooked all night, and because I was the sole American they ever met in their entire life. These kids too, they were so struck with the fact that I spoke fluent Arabic, and they just took me on a tour of their town. I got interviewed on TV because of that. And this is one of my favorite moments ever, is encountering these guys in the mountains in Salalah, because they were like, what are you doing here? I said, what are you guys doing here? They're having tea. And also this guy who I found in the Yemeni border. I show these pictures. I show these pictures because I want you to put a face to how diplomacy works, and how you interact with people. My mentors, my dearest mentors in diplomacy, I would say are Omani. There's a Sultan and Samira, who were with me, the co-founders of Normajan Arabic Institute in Oman. They co-founded the Ibri branch. I did the Muscat branch, and they taught me so much. They taught me so much about diplomacy, and I learned so much from them in terms of like respect, listening, leadership, and so many aspects of life. So I will stop sharing this. And so all of these moments could be viewed as teachable moments. where you interact with somebody who's not from your place, and but yet you find a way to reach and really understand their culture, and they reach and understand your culture. So I think what's important is that all New Mexicans have the ability to really be diplomats in every single sense of the word, because they embody a different narrative of the United States that is not often heard, and that is actually needed to be heard in the in the work of diplomacy. So I
We love technology. That's okay. You go tell them, Carlo. You have a dad that speaks Spanish, so he'll get it. No.
Working from home, I think.
sorry, the kitchen's like right there. This is the problem.
So we're going to your house after. We promise we'll do social distancing.
Yes, of course, anytime. And that is something I learned about from the Omanis, is the hospitality portion of it. And so I'm talking about all of this stuff and putting a face to diplomacy is so that you guys can see that it happens not in the boardrooms. It doesn't happen in, you know, all these other places. It happens everywhere. And as New Mexicans, like I said, we embody a different narrative of this country that really, for the first time, like many of those pictures, I was the first American they ever met in their entire life. How do you think that informs their image of America, their perspective of this country? Like, it's just incredible, the fact that you know, sometimes you really change a person's mind and perception of a place because you're not the typical individual and you embody a different story. So I really draw upon my love for New Mexico as a strength of diplomacy. Let me see. I would say that another teachable moment, and one of the most important things about also diplomacy, I guess in the beginning, we didn't really define what diplomacy is or what the Foreign Service is. But as a diplomat, I am the face and I'm the embodiment of the US government and its people. I'm one of the former representatives of this country. And so that means I also represent its values, its ideals, its aspirations, and its hopes and dreams. And of course, its policies. I have to represent the president's policies, whoever is in office, whether or not, because that is a part of the professional deal of being the professional service of the Foreign Service. And so, but what's important is that we can rely upon our American ideals as powerful tools of stories. And I'm going to say this in terms of, there was an experience of mine in 2015 when the Supreme Court decided that marriage equality with gay rights is a real thing, that we recognize this as a legitimate thing, and LGBTQI community have this enshrined in the US Constitution. This, of course, was not received kindly abroad. This was not received, you know, very nicely in many places, especially where I was in Oman. And I was bowling with friends of mine at that day. And these were like, you know, very bro-ish men. And they were teasing me and saying, oh, you know, your country, you gave into this horrible agenda of the gays and homosexual agenda. How dare you, blah, 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 blah. Just went on and on and on and on and on. And then finally, I was like, okay, guys, can we have enough fun about this? This is just too much. And then I explained to them that I am very, very happy that this happened. And they said, why? And I said, okay, let's look at American history. I'm talking to them as they were Zanzibari, Omanis from the African coast. They were Black and they were Muslim. So I said, if you were in America in the 1950s as a Black Muslim, you would not have the same rights as your white counterparts. And they were like, what? And I said, yes. If you came to the United States, even to this day, sometimes you're not treated with the same equality. So the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. fought for, and all the civil rights leaders, they fought for rights for the Black community, but they also fought rights for all of America, and to make America's aspirations and dreams true. And so they didn't understand at first. And then I gave them like concrete examples and saying, look, if you decided to want to rent a home, if you wanted to do X, Y, and Z, get a job, you would be discriminated against because based on the color of your skin. And so any win for any minority group in the United States of actualizing and realizing this aspirations and values of the country is a win for all. And so it took them a minute to kind of just think about it. And then they realized that, yeah, they were wrong. Because if one group fails, everybody fails. And so they understood that America, you know, despite that there are difference of beliefs, they respected that decision afterwards. And so we can use those moments and say, hey, let's look at it a different way. And let's put you in the picture. And then they begin to understand why America does certain things. And my last teachable moment that I'll talk about is the power of being American. So when I was in Oman, a lot of my stories happen in Oman because I lived there for 5 years or 4 years. I found family members who are there, my mom's cousins, who are from the Philippines. And in the Gulf, migrant workers is a big thing, from the Philippines, from Sri Lanka, from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from India, but they're not necessarily the most respected peoples in the country. And so there was a time when my cousin was working at the mall and he was falsely accused of sexual harassment. And right away, he was sent to jail. He was taken from his job at the mall and placed in a jail cell and stuffed papers in his face, and they told him to sign it. And he signed it because he didn't know what he was reading. He didn't understand any Arabic. This was all a language thing. And then I was called in by my family, and then they asked me, can you talk to a lawyer, and can you talk to the police, and can you talk to blah, blah, blah. So I used my Arabic skills to talk to the police. But when I talked to the police, to the owners of the mall, and to the other individuals I put in contact to, and when I said I was American, they immediately were like, oh, we must do this, we must do that, we must do this, we must do that, because I wasn't from one of the not respected groups in the country. And it was strange, because it's strange, because I viewed myself, I look like my cousin. Like there's nothing separating me except for a passport that says I'm American. And so this was really strange for me. But it also made me aware of the power of this country in terms of really like advocating for people. And so one of the things that we do as diplomats is that we monitor situations across the country, and we monitor human rights, we monitor religious conditions, we report on these, and we want these countries to have, you know, good human rights and good religious and respecting religious rights, because it benefits everybody, and we focus on human rights as a thing. And so I realized that, yeah, you know, that there's a big need across the world to focus on equal rights and representation. I was able to negotiate with a lawyer to not, and the police, to not put the, to not ban him from the country. Rather, he was just shipped off to the Philippines, and he could be welcomed back on another visa. But that is something that we do sometimes, even for our own citizens in countries abroad. When American citizens are in trouble, it is the US diplomatic force, or US diplomacy, or US diplomats in general. We are there. We are making sure that the proper rights are given, that you know, that the Americans are not being tortured or whatever, and we try to make sure that whatever happened was fair. We will respect the country's laws, and we will not coerce the country to giving back the person for doing wrong deeds and breaking their laws, but we will make sure that the Americans are fine. And so that was a big thing for me, a teachable moment in my life. So I guess I'll stop there, and I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions.
I really don't want it to stop. This is so fascinating. There's so many, it's just information that I have no even idea. For example, what you said about Albuquerque. And of course, we all probably know people that they're watching right now, Albuquerque comes, of course, and there's a city in Spain. But like what you just said, that actually there's the meaning of a plum. That's amazing. So I didn't know that. So it's just in so many things that you just share with us. But I know we have some people that would like to make that would like to ask you something. But please feel free to either put it in the chat or go ahead and ask Carlo. We still have some 10, 15 minutes or so before we just finish this wonderful conversation. Okay, so Jill, feel free, Jill, to just ask.
Oh, well, sorry. I was going to ask a question, but I guess Jill's.
Oh, no, Melora, go right ahead.
Okay. Sorry if I missed this, because I missed the first couple minutes. I was busy doing something. Nice to meet you, Carlo. Here, I'll put myself on video, although my hair's kind of messy. Wow, what an interesting life. That's pretty amazing. So I might have missed this. So I guess you're back in Albuquerque now. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And do you have any opportunities to travel abroad again? And what might those be?
That's a good question. So I joined the U.S. Foreign Service actually this summer. And I went through training in terms of orientation, and then I was assigned afterwards to be a consular officer in Kathmandu, Nepal. So I will be preparing from now, July 2021, for Nepal.
Excellent. All right. Well,
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that fits into what I was going to ask. I'm Jill, and thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope that we're going to be able to take this recording and put it in some of our schools where some of our kids are being taught international classes. I can think of several high schools where that's happening now. It'd be fabulous. I'm curious, so you say you're preparing from now until for the next year, it sounds like, until you can go to Nepal. So what does your day look like?
Good question. So for the next 2-3 weeks, my weekly schedule will be different because for this week, I am learning all there is, or trying to learn all there is about South Asia. So all the countries in South Asia, like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, Nepal, Bhutan. And then next week, again, I start learning about the region more in depth. And then in about 2 weeks, I start language training for Nepali. So the State Department is very serious about people learning languages. You don't have to know any language before you actually join the department, but they will teach you. So like for me, I have 31 weeks of language training for Nepali, and I must reach a level that is like a workable level, so I can ask individuals who would like to immigrate or travel to the United States why they would like to come to the United States as a consular officer.
Wow, does anybody else have another question for Carlo?
Well, while people are thinking, I just wanted to follow up and say that when I lived in New Zealand, I had a man who is a Sherpa come work on our farm. And he ended up immigrating to New Zealand as a, what is it when you're a political, not refugee, but
Asylee?
A political asylum. Yeah, that's what he got. So he was he and his wife and his children he brought over from Nepal. It was very interesting. So we don't get to hear a lot about in the US about, what's actually happening on the ground in Nepal. We get to hear about maybe, the mountains and Sir Edmund Hillary and, the waste waste and that sort of thing, but we don't get to hear about some of the politics on the ground that are happening in that country.
Yeah, actually, I would like to comment in terms of the fact is that in terms of career trajectories in the department, because you will hear a lot of people being like, oh, you know, as a diplomat, you'll be reporting on the political conditions and economic conditions in the country. That is true. So let me just take apart the U.S. Foreign Service and its expertise. So in the U.S. Foreign Service, in the State Department, there are other foreign services like in agriculture and USAID. But in the State Department, there are a few specialties. One is management. Management officers, they're responsible for all of the day-to-day operations within the embassy, like taking care of HR in general, and also all of the sort of properties that we have across the country, whatever it is. Then there's the consular affairs, which is actually one of the most important portions of the embassy and is actually why we are where we are around the world. And that is to adjudicate and look at visas, applications for visas to the United States from the local population. And so I think what's interesting is that it's been popularized in an interesting way, the work of the Foreign Service officer in 90 Day Fiancé. So looking at like, is this relationship with this person in the United States from X country, is this real? And should we grant this person a visa to go visit them? And also people who want to migrate. Then there's also the American Services portion of consular affairs, which is really why we're there. We're there to protect American citizens. We're there to make sure that if like COVID happened, we flew back 40,000 people in like 2 weeks. And we had to negotiate with governments on flights and everything. And so this is a really important portion of diplomacy. And every US diplomat must serve as a consular officer for at least one tour. And that's will be my first tour. Then, of course, there's what we traditionally think of diplomats. There are the political and econ officers. Paul and econ, they both are reporting jobs in terms of you report and monitor the situation on the ground, and you basically influence policy through that way by making sure that people understand what is happening in X country and what the United States needs to be aware and why. And then there's my cone, it's public diplomacy. So we are responsible for the exchange of ideas and cultures and about the United States into different countries. We sponsor lots of different programs, I'm sure, like Global Ties, the IVLP program, and also like language exchanges, as you heard me say, but in-country programs as well. For example, the US Embassy in Algeria sponsored a TV show called Andy Hulm, which means I have a dream, and it's a Shark Tank spin-off to encourage entrepreneurship inside country. Public diplomacy officers are also the spokespersons of the embassy and of US policy. So like, for example, I could be in front of a camera talking about US trade relations with China. So, I mean, these are some things that we do as the public diplomacy officers in general. So yes, reporting about Nepal will be somebody's job, will be my colleague's job.
Thank you so much, Carlo. Does anybody have any other questions? We still have time for one, possibly two questions for Carlo.
I guess,
yeah, go ahead.
I guess I would like to just end with a little bit more of like what public diplomacy does, like in real, like all of the photos that you saw were things before I entered the State Department, and they were sort of like tangential to public diplomacy initiatives, but they were part of public diplomacy work. But I'm about to show you things that are public diplomacy work. And so when I was last year, I should say that I entered the State Department through a unique fellowship called the Rangel and Pickering Rangel Fellowship. There's a Rangel and Pickering Fellowship which recruits individuals who haven't or who want to do a master's degree. They pay for their master's degree and then they join the Foreign Service for required 5 years of service. And so you can enter the State Department through this way, and I chose to enter it this way. And one of the main aspects about it is the fact that it provides a lot of mentoring and training before coming into the foreign service. So I had an internship at US Embassy Algiers. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about what happened in Algiers. So while I was there, I worked with an English language program, and I got to work with students who were part of this intensive English program. And we took them to American companies, but like Berlitz and Lilly, to see what kind of careers there are in the private sector, since the Algerian government doesn't have a large, or Algeria doesn't have a large private sector, excuse me. They wanted to really look at how to encourage youth to be more entrepreneurial and look at the private sector as career opportunities. I also had the opportunity to speak with athletes who were participating in a Bucket and Dreams program, which encouraged young Algerians to play sports, both women and men, and learn the values of leadership and the values of sportsmanship, and then also perhaps get a scholarship to go to the United States to study. So I was speaking about the US system of education with my colleagues there, to these bright individuals. And then this is one of my favorite photos. This is of the ambassador and his wife, and a very famous artist, Algerian musical artist, together. And I don't know if you can find me, but I'm there on sort of the right of one of the singers. But we are chanting, "Shab yurid Kub Afrique, Shab yurid Kub Afrique," which means that the people want the Algerian Cup, in terms of they want to win the Algerian soccer competition of the African Cup. And so we made that video, and guess what? They won. And there was pandemonium through the whole entire country, and I got to experience it and see that. So we were so excited to do that. One of the other things is that I also reached back into New Mexico, and I decided that my friend Isabella Trujillo, who is part of Hijastros, and some of you may know Hijastros from the Albuquerque Hotel Tablao, or just Hijastros in general, but they're the premier flamenco group in the United States, and my best friend, happens to be part of it. So she just came to Algeria. She said she would come, and I said, well, why don't you help us dance at the embassy? And she said, yes, but you have to find me a guitarist. So I actually found an Algerian guitarist through some contacts there, and they practiced together, and then they decided that, okay, it's good, let's do a show. And so there was a show at the American Cultural Center of Algiers, which was about showcasing that New Mexico is a place, and it also embodies Spanish culture. And so this is some of the pictures from it. Ole, we had a presentation of the history of flamenco, and she was dancing for an audience there. It was live streamed at the embassy Facebook, and there was about 3,000 people watching when it was live, and now there's like 30,000 views of this. So it's pretty cool. And so this was my major achievement in Algiers, was putting this together along with other sort of cultural presentations. And so this I just wanted to put together as a face to really what public diplomacy is and how creative you can get. And so I hope that you thinking about some individuals who would be perfect for a career in diplomacy, because I think it's absolutely worth it. And you get to serve your country, and you get to embody a different story of the United States as a New Mexican, which is really unique, and people love that. There was a book in the American Cultural Center in Algiers, and they had places of America. And all the time the kids were looking at Chicago, LA, New York. And I was like, no, you need to look over here. And they put it to Acoma Pueblo. And they're like, what is that? And I was like, yeah, this is America. And they're like, what do you mean this is America? This looks like some mud houses from our villages here. And I said, yeah, of course, because we also have that in America. And this history is old too. This is a 1,000-year-old building. And they were like, what? 1,000 years old in America? And I said, yes. So all of that is to say, that is the importance of diplomacy and of public diplomacy in general.
Wow, Carlo, thank you so much. And I love your enthusiasm. Congratulations for your career. 27. I was joking when I said 25. I thought you were gonna say like 20 or something.
I know.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. The career that you have ahead of you. But thank you so much for representing New Mexico the way that you do. It's absolutely amazing for you to, like I was saying at the beginning, with that passion, and actually you transmit it. You, like, people can feel it and can look at you, and you teaching about or talking about Acoma or other, all the 19 pueblos that we have here in New Mexico. Really, thank you so much for everything that you do for the community, for country, of course, what you want to be doing in Nepal. I already told you I'm coming to visit you. I don't know when, but I'm coming to see you. And, everything that you mentioned, and of course, the stereotype of the history and the stereotype of people, just, the idea that people have around the world about the United States. But, it's from the outside, but also from the inside. You are the perfect person to be talking about Albuquerque, about Santa Fe, about New Mexico, about your family, about heritage, about immigration, and the importance of having, your family, your dad, your mom, and you here, and were raised in New Mexico, and with agriculture and family-oriented. So that's absolutely fantastic. Congratulations again. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. I know people I see, clapping, and that's absolutely fantastic. And just, really quick, and Global Ties, and the reason why we exist, as I always mention, since 1963, and how proud we are. We have brought more than 5,000 international visitors. I can say we, even though that I just barely started in this job, but just bringing all of these international visitors and international exchanges. So when we have people from all over the world coming to Albuquerque, and then so I asked the question with one of the groups that we were able to receive back in February before the pandemic started, is like, okay, so what do you think? What is it, about Albuquerque, or what did you know about New Mexico? So many things. It's just like, okay, that you guys speak Spanish, and that we get confused with the New Mexico and the Mexico, and how it used to be part of Mexico, and the history that you mentioned at the beginning, of course, with Native Americans. And just, thank you for doing that, for representing the way that you do. And I really hope that so many people can be sharing this, recording, and like Jill mentioned, to the high school students and younger generations, and to see you and listen from you, and how the importance of sharing the United States, America, is an amazing place to be. Thank you so much, Carlo, for this amazing conversation that we have with you. And once again, like I said, just let me know if we want to go visiting you to Nepal. And so also we're going to be leaving soon to go to your house and, eating, because we heard all the cooking going on over there. Thank you on behalf of Destiny and myself, and the Board of Directors of Global Ties, and all the members, and every single one of you. Thank you for all your support that you give to this, to Global Ties ABQ. Thank you, Carlo. Have a wonderful, hi.
Yeah, really. I've been watching on Facebook for a while. Sorry, I'm running around.
Okay, perfect. Hello, and well, thank you so much, Carlo. Thank you. Congratulations, and the best of luck to you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Hi, CJ.
Hi.
We're so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll call you.
Let's talk soon.
Bye-bye.